Your daughter is making errors due to cognitive deterioration and is a liability to your firm. That was the sentence, typed anonymously, sent to the managing partner of the accounting firm where I had worked for 7 years, sent by my own brother from his own work computer during business hours because he didn't think anyone would check. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Corinne Ashby. I'm 32 years old. I'm a senior accountant at Halloran and Reed Financial Group in Lexington, Kentucky. I have no husband, no children, no dramatic personal life. I go to work, I come home, I keep records. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. And 3 months ago, my parents filed a guardianship petition in Fayette County Circuit Court claiming I was losing my mind. Let me take you back. 7 years back. I was 25. I'd just been promoted to senior staff at Halloran and Reed, first real professional milestone of my life. I remember the afternoon Dennis Parker, the managing partner, called me into his office to tell me. I remember the way the light came through the blinds. I remember thinking, I did this. Nobody handed it to me. I did this. I called my mother that evening. Janine, I told her about the promotion. I told her about the raise, $87,000 a year, more money than anyone in my family had ever made in a salaried position. She said, congratulations. Then she paused, and then she said, Mitchell's been struggling with his rent again. You know how it is for him. He's still finding his footing. Mitchell is my younger brother, 4 years younger, 28 now. He was 21 then. And finding his footing was a phrase my mother used the way other people use duct tape. It covered everything. It fixed nothing. His rent was $1,400 a month. I don't know how he found an apartment that cost $1,400 a month on what he was making, but he did, and he couldn't cover it. And my mother made it clear without ever saying the words directly that it was now my responsibility. Family doesn't keep score, she said. That was the first time she said it. It would not be the last. So I started paying. $1,400 a month, every month, no gap, no questions, no lease in my name, no documentation, no written agreement. Just a transfer from my checking account to Mitchell's on the first of every month like clockwork. Because that's what family does. That's what I told myself. Then came the insurance. My father, Lyle, was 64. My mother was 61. They had a supplemental insurance premium they couldn't quite cover on their own. $900 a month. Janine brought it up casually at Easter dinner, the way you mentioned the weather before asking someone to help you move. We'd never ask if we didn't need it, she said. But your father's health isn't what it was. And you know how these things work. I did know how these things worked. I was an accountant. I knew exactly what $900 a month meant over time. I knew what $1,400 a month meant over time. I knew that $2,300 a month on an $87,000 salary before taxes was not a small number. But I said yes, because family doesn't keep score. $2,300 a month for 7 years. That's $193,200. I did that math a long time ago. I just never said it out loud. Mitchell never invited me to his apartment, not once in 7 years. I paid his rent every single month, and I have never seen the inside of the place I was paying for. I don't know what color his walls are. I don't know if he has a couch. I know he has a mailbox because the check's cleared. My parents never acknowledged the insurance payments as anything other than what Janine called what family does. There was no thank you. There was no quarterly check-in. There was certainly no offer to reduce the amount or take over a portion when Lyle picked up part-time consulting work through the church. The $900 simply left my account every month and arrived in theirs, and that was the end of the conversation. And here's the part that I carried quietly for a long time. I never told anyone at work. I never told friends. I never framed it as a burden because I didn't let myself see it that way. I told myself this was simply what family did. I told myself the money didn't matter because it was going to. People I loved. I told myself that keeping score was something cold people did, and I wasn't cold. I was the responsible one. I was the one who had a good job and a steady paycheck and no kids and no mortgage, and if I couldn't help my own family, what was the point of any of it? I swallowed it every month for 7 years. Then my grandmother died. Dorothy Ashby, my mother's mother. She passed quietly 3 months before everything changed. There was no estate, no money, no property, no stocks, no bonds, no hidden accounts. Dorothy lived simply, and she died with almost nothing, except one thing, a pocket watch. Old, not valuable, not worth anything on any market that measures worth in dollars, but inscribed on the back in Dorothy's handwriting, etched into the metal by a jeweler she'd visited decades ago, were 4 words: trust your own mind. She left it to me. Specifically to me, not to Mitchell, not to my parents, to Corinne. That was clear in the letter she'd written and given to the pastor who handled her final arrangements. There was no will to contest because there was no estate to distribute. Just a letter and a pocket watch and 4 words I didn't fully understand yet. My parents attended the funeral. They said nothing about the watch. Not 1 word. Janine hugged me. Lyle shook the pastor's hand. They drove home. I put the pocket watch on my nightstand and went back to work the next morning. 3 months later, I came home from the office on a Tuesday evening. It was just past 6. I set my bag down. I checked the mail. There was a legal envelope. Fayette County Circuit Court. My name typed across the front in a font that made it look like a bill you forgot to pay. I opened it standing in my kitchen. It was a guardianship petition, filed by Lyle and Janine Ashby, my parents, claiming that their daughter, Corinne Ashby, age 32, was exhibiting signs of early onset cognitive decline, claiming I was no longer capable of managing my own financial and personal affairs, claiming I needed a court-appointed guardian to oversee my decisions. I read it once. I set it down on the counter. I read it again. Attached to the petition was a neurological evaluation. It described a clinical examination. It described cognitive testing. It described findings consistent with early-stage dementia. It described a patient who was losing her ability to function independently, and at the bottom of that evaluation, typed neatly above a signature line, was a name I recognized: Dr. Meredith Shaw, board-certified neurologist, my college roommate, the woman I had lived with for 3 years at the University of Kentucky, the woman I had eaten cereal with at midnight during finals week, the woman whose handwriting I knew better than my own because I had proofread her biochemistry papers for 4 semesters straight. Her signature was on the document, except it wasn't her signature. It wasn't even close. Meredith has a very specific way of writing the letter M. She loops it twice. This signature didn't loop at all. It looked like someone had pulled her name from a medical directory and tried to replicate it from a printed version. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The light above the stove was the only one on. The apartment was quiet. The petition sat on the counter next to a coffee mug I'd used that morning and hadn't washed yet. My parents had filed a legal document claiming I was losing my mind. They had attached a fabricated medical evaluation. They had forged the signature of a real neurologist. And that neurologist happened to be someone I had known since I was 18 years old. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I didn't call Mitchell. I picked up the petition one more time and turned to the supplemental affidavit, Janine's, filed separately, supporting the petition with additional observations. One paragraph stopped me. The subject exhibits hoarding behavior and irrational attachment to objects, consistent with early cognitive decline. Following the death of her maternal grandmother, the subject has fixated on a pocket watch of no monetary or practical value, keeping it on her person or beside her bed at all times, and has refused to discuss its significance when asked. The pocket watch. Dorothy's pocket watch. Trust your own mind. My mother had taken the only thing my grandmother ever left me and turned it into evidence that I was losing my mind. I set the affidavit down. I set it down slowly, deliberately, the way you set something down when you know that if you move too fast, you will not be able to stop what comes next. I sat at my kitchen table with the petition, the evaluation, and the affidavit spread in front of me. The apartment was dark except for the light above the stove. The street light cut through the blinds in thin lines across the floor. Something inside me shifted, not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, quiet break. Like a bone that had been holding weight it was never designed to carry, and it simply stopped. I was done pretending this was okay. I didn't know yet about Mitchell's emails. I didn't know that while I sat in that kitchen reading a fabricated evaluation with my roommate's forged signature, my brother had already sent an anonymous message to Dennis Parker at Halloran and Reed, claiming I was making errors at work due to cognitive deterioration. I didn't know that he had sent it from his own work computer, because Mitchell has never once thought about the second step of anything he's done. I didn't know any of that yet. If you've ever had your own family try to take away everything you built, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story isn't over. All I knew was what was in front of me, a petition that called me incompetent, an evaluation that was a forgery, an affidavit that turned my grandmother's last gift into a symptom, and a pocket watch on my nightstand with 4 words engraved on the back. I sat there for a long time. The coffee in the mug beside me had gone cold hours ago. The apartment was silent. My phone sat face down on the table. I picked it up. I turned it over. The screen lit up. And I did the only thing that mattered. I called Meredith. It rang 3 times. She picked up on the 4th. I could hear something in the background, a television, maybe a dishwasher running, normal sounds, the sounds of someone's Tuesday evening that hadn't been torn open by a legal envelope. Corinne? She sounded surprised. We talked maybe twice a year, birthday texts, the occasional comment on a photo, the kind of friendship that doesn't need maintenance because the foundation was poured a long time ago. Meredith, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me. Did you sign a neurological evaluation with my name on it? Silence. Not the kind where someone is choosing their words. The kind where someone has stopped breathing. What? A neurological evaluation. Clinical examination. Cognitive testing. Findings consistent with early-stage dementia. Your name is on it. Your signature is at the bottom. It's attached to a guardianship petition filed by my parents in Fayette County Circuit Court. The television sound disappeared. She had either muted it or walked into another room. When she spoke again, her voice was different, not frightened. Clinical. The voice of someone whose professional credentials had just been described to her as a weapon used against someone she knew. Corinne, I have never examined you. I have never spoken to you in any clinical capacity. I have never authorized my signature on any document bearing your name as a patient. That evaluation does not exist in my records because I did not perform it. I stayed quiet. There was nothing to add. Do you have a copy of the document? She asked. I'm holding it. I need you to send me a photograph of every page, tonight, and I need the name of your attorney because I will be providing a sworn statement that my credentials were used without my knowledge or consent, and I will testify to that under oath. The call lasted 11 minutes. I know because I looked at the screen when it ended. 11 minutes. That was all it took. 11 minutes to set into motion every consequence that would follow. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread in front of me, and I photographed every page. I sent them to Meredith. Then I opened my laptop and typed a single email to a name I'd been given 2 months earlier by a senior colleague at the firm, a family law attorney in Fayette County named Alan Brooks. The email was 3 sentences long. I described what I had received. I attached the photographs. I asked if he could see me the following morning. He responded at 6:14 a.m. He could. By the end of that first day, Alan Brooks had Dr. Meredith Shaw's signed statement in his possession. Not a favor, not a friendly gesture. A sworn declaration from a board-certified neurologist that her name, her credentials, and her signature had been forged on a clinical document she had never created, attached to a court filing she had never been informed of, describing an examination she had never conducted. She stated it plainly, without emotion, in the language of someone who understood that her professional integrity was not a thing she could afford to have floating around Fayette County attached to a fabricated diagnosis. Alan read the declaration twice. Then he set it down and looked at me across his desk. They built the entire petition on this evaluation, he said. Without it, there is no medical basis for the claim. Without a medical basis, there is no petition. I nodded. Your parents either forged this themselves or had someone do it for them. Either way, it's a felony under Kentucky revised statutes. Forgery of a medical document used in a court proceeding. I nodded again. I'm going to file a formal response. I'm going to attach Dr. Shaw's statement. And I'm going to request that the court examine the origins of this evaluation, because once a forged document enters a court filing, the judge doesn't just deny the petition. The judge refers. He paused. Are you prepared for what referral means? I looked at him. I kept my voice steady. It means criminal proceedings against my father. Yes, I understand. I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I had spent 7 years absorbing $2,300 a month in silence. I had spent 7 years never being invited to Mitchell's apartment. I had spent 7 years hearing family doesn't keep score, as though it were scripture instead of a leash. And when I inherited a pocket watch with no monetary value from a woman who loved me enough to leave me 4 words, my mother turned it into a diagnosis. There was nothing left to absorb. Alan filed the response within 72 hours. Dr. Shaw's sworn statement entered the record. The petition was flagged for judicial review, and then the second thing happened. Dennis Parker called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. I assumed it was about the quarterly audit reports. It wasn't. He closed the door. He sat down across from me. He placed a single sheet of paper on the desk between us and turned it so I could read it. It was a printout of an email, sent anonymously to Dennis's work address. The subject line read, Urgent Concern, Employee Cognitive Fitness. The body of the email described a senior accountant at Halloran and Reed whose work had become unreliable due to cognitive deterioration. It recommended immediate review of my case files. It suggested I was a liability to the firm. Dennis watched me read it. He didn't interrupt. "This arrived 9 days ago," he said. "I didn't act on it. I sent it to our IT department for metadata analysis." He placed a second sheet beside the first. The metadata report: transmission origin, device ID, IP address, workstation registration. Every line pointed to the same place: Mitchell Ashby, my brother's work computer, sent during business hours, from a man who didn't think about the second step. Dennis summarized what had followed. The employer had been notified and run their own internal review. Their finding, submitted to the court, was unambiguous. The metadata traced the emails to a single workstation, registered to Mitchell Ashby, transmitted during working hours. The firm terminated his employment effective that afternoon. I stared at the metadata report, the numbers, the timestamps, the workstation ID. All the things Mitchell never considered because Mitchell has never once in his life looked past the moment he was standing in. Dennis leaned back in his chair. "Corinne, I've watched you work for 7 years. You've caught discrepancies that 3 other senior accountants missed. Your files are the cleanest in this building. I'm not telling you this to make you feel better. I'm telling you because the record speaks, and anonymous emails don't outweigh it." I kept my voice steady. "Thank you, Dennis. Your position here is not in question. It never was." I nodded once. I stood. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. I opened the quarterly file I'd been working on, and I finished it. Mitchell's employer cooperated with the court referral. The metadata report was submitted into the record alongside Dr. Shaw's sworn statement and Alan Brooks's formal response. The picture that emerged was precise and complete. A guardianship petition built on a forged evaluation. A forged evaluation bearing the stolen credentials of a neurologist who had never examined the subject. A supplemental affidavit that characterized a dead woman's pocket watch as evidence of mental illness, and an anonymous email campaign targeting the subject's employer sent by the petitioner's own son from his own work computer, designed to destroy the professional reputation that had quietly funded the entire family for 7 years. The judge reviewed the record over the following weeks. Dr. Meredith Shaw testified under oath. She was not there as my friend. She was there as a physician whose name had been forged on a fraudulent clinical document filed in a court of law. She dismantled the evaluation line by line. She identified inconsistencies in the testing methodology described. She noted that the format of the evaluation did not match any standardized neurological assessment protocol used in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. She confirmed that the signature at the bottom was not hers, not a version of hers, not a hurried version, not hers at all. When she finished, the courtroom was quiet. The ruling came down on a Wednesday. Guardianship denied. The petition was found to lack any credible evidentiary foundation. The court referred Lyle Ashby for criminal investigation under Kentucky revised statutes for forgery of a medical document used in a judicial proceeding. The court referred Mitchell Ashby for coordinated workplace harassment based on the metadata evidence and his employer's cooperation. And the court ordered Janine Ashby to pay $18,700 in legal fees incurred by the respondent, based on the filing of a petition supported by perjured evidence. $18,700. That was the only money that moved in my direction through any of this, not the $117,600 I had paid in Mitchell's rent. Not the $75,600 I had paid in my parents' insurance premiums. Not a single dollar of the 7 years of transfers that had never once received a written acknowledgement. I didn't bring any of that into court. Alan had asked me if I wanted to. I said no. That money was gone. It had always been gone. And putting a number on it in a courtroom wouldn't change what it bought me, which was nothing. 3 days after the referral, my doorbell rang at 8. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. Lyle and Janine, standing on my doorstep. My father's shirt was untucked on one side. My mother's lipstick was slightly uneven, the way it gets when she applies it in the car without checking the mirror. They looked diminished, not destroyed yet. That would come later, but smaller than I had ever seen them. I opened the door, 6 inches. I kept my hand on the frame. I did not step aside. I did not offer them chairs. Lyle spoke first. His voice was hoarse. "Corinne, we made a mistake." Janine stepped forward. "Families work through things. That's what we've always done. That's what your grandmother would have wanted." I felt something tighten behind my ribs at the mention of Dorothy, but it passed. It passed because I let it pass. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I waited until the silence between us became the loudest thing in the hallway. Then I said one sentence. "Where is your apology to me?" My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. My mother blinked. Her lips parted slightly, the way they do when she is calculating what to say next, running the words through the filter she has used my entire life to reshape cruelty into concern. Neither of them answered. I didn't repeat the question. I didn't wait for them to find the words. I had spent 7 years waiting for words that never came, and I was done standing in doorways, hoping the next sentence would be different. The door closed softly. No slam. Just the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. I stood in my hallway for a long time after they left. The apartment was dark except for the light above the stove. The street light cut through the blinds in thin lines across the floor. My phone sat on the kitchen table. It did not buzz. It did not light up. Not yet. That would come later, too, but in that moment, the apartment was still. And the quiet was not heavy. It was not sad. It was not angry. It was clean. I went through my phone that night. Not in anger, not in haste, in clarity. I blocked Janine's number, first, then Lyle's, then Mitchell's. I removed myself from the family group chat that had never once contained a message thanking me for anything. I deleted the thread of text messages from my mother that stretched back 3 years, every one of them either a request disguised as a reminder or a reminder disguised as guilt. I did not reread any of them. I removed all 3 from my emergency contact list at work and replaced them with Dr. Meredith Shaw's office number because if something ever happened to me, I wanted the person notified to be someone who would tell the truth about who I was. I changed the code on my apartment building's entry system. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb. I turned off the ringer. Then I made a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table with the light above the stove still the only one on, and did nothing. I just sat there. The pocket watch was on the table beside me where I had set it earlier. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. That was the first night in 4 months I slept through until morning. The calls came the next day. 17 missed. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. I deleted them without opening them, the way you delete spam that arrives in someone else's name. Texts came through from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Lyle or Janine calling from other phones. Maybe a cousin. Maybe someone from the church who had been recruited to apply pressure. I didn't read those either. I let them pile up in a notification count that meant nothing to me, and then I cleared it with one tap. 3 days later, my doorbell rang again. 2 long presses. I looked through the peephole. Mitchell. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His jacket was wrinkled. His eyes were red-rimmed. He hadn't shaved. I didn't open the door. He rang again. He knocked. He said my name through the door, and his voice cracked the way voices crack when someone realizes for the first time that the person on the other side is not going to absorb what they have done. "Corinne, please, I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stood in the hallway. I listened. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, nothing. He knocked twice more. Then he stopped. I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. The building's front door closed behind him with a sound I could barely hear. I went back to my kitchen table and opened my laptop to finish a reconciliation report that was due Friday. That was the last time any of them came to my door. The weeks after the ruling moved the way water moves downhill, quietly, steadily, in one direction. Mitchell's termination for cause followed him everywhere he applied. Background checks surfaced it within the first round of screening. The harassment referral attached to his employment record didn't help. He applied to 4 firms in the first month. None called back. He applied to 6 more in the second month. 2 interviews. Both ended after the background check cleared. His $46,000 salary was gone entirely. By month 4, Mitchell moved out of the $1,400 apartment I had been paying for and into a shared house with 2 roommates on the other side of Lexington. I didn't learn this by asking. I didn't learn it by looking. A colleague at work mentioned it in passing, the way people mention things they assume you already know. I nodded once and changed the subject. Lyle's criminal forgery proceedings moved through the court system over the following 6 months. The fabricated neurological evaluation was examined in detail. The forged signature was submitted to a handwriting analyst. The absence of any corresponding patient record in Dr. Shaw's clinical files confirmed what Meredith had already stated under oath. The document was a fabrication from the first line to the last. Lyle's name was on the petition that submitted it. His signature was on every page that mattered. I did not attend those proceedings. Alan Brooks kept me informed as necessary, but I did not ask for updates. I did not track the docket. I did not drive past the courthouse. The system I had trusted to tell the truth was telling it, and I did not need to stand in the room to confirm it was happening. The court filing was public record. That is how the congregation found out. Lyle and Janine had chaired the ethics committee at their Presbyterian church for 9 years. They organized the annual stewardship drive. They coordinated the holiday meal program. They sat in the third pew every Sunday and greeted the pastor by his first name. They were known. They were visible. And within 7 days of the ruling, the filing circulated through the congregation the way public filings do, without anyone needing to send them. They were asked not to return. Quietly, privately. The way churches handle things they cannot afford to be associated with. No announcement, no public statement. Just a conversation with the pastor that ended with Lyle and Janine walking to their car in the parking lot on a Sunday afternoon and not coming back. I did not contact anyone in that congregation. I did not send the filing. I did not whisper to anyone. The document did what public documents do. It existed. People found it. And the couple who had spent 9 years chairing an ethics committee were undone by a single act of forgery they thought no one would check. The $900 a month in supplemental insurance that I had been paying for 7 years became their full responsibility the day I stopped the transfer. $75,600 I had covered without acknowledgement, without reduction, without so much as a handwritten note at Christmas. Now it came out of their account. Every month, $900 they had forgotten was real because I had made it invisible. By month 8, the shape of their lives had contracted entirely. The church community that had been their social world for nearly a decade was gone. Lyle's forgery proceedings continued to move forward. Mitchell was working inconsistent hours at a job that paid less than half of what he had been making, and the $1,400 a month that had arrived in his account like weather for 7 years had stopped. The friends who had eaten at their table and laughed at their jokes and sat on their committee were people who now knew what a guardianship petition looked like and what a forged neurologist's signature meant. I did not seek any of this information. It arrived the way consequences arrive, through the ordinary passage of time, through public records, through the quiet observation of people who had once respected my parents and now simply didn't. I did not witness any of it in person. I did not drive past their house. I did not check Mitchell's social media. I did not keep a running tally of what had been lost. I simply stopped. I stayed at Halloran and Reed. Dennis Parker never mentioned the anonymous emails again after our conversation in his office. He did not bring it up at staff meetings. He did not reference it in my annual review. He treated it the way a managing partner treats something that has been investigated and found baseless. He let my work speak, and my work spoke clearly the way it always had, in clean files and caught discrepancies and quarterly reports submitted on time. I woke up the morning after the ruling and made coffee. I went to work. I came home. I kept records. I ate dinner at my kitchen table. I slept through the night. For the first time in 4 months, I slept without waking at 3 a.m. to check my phone for something I didn't want to find. The evening the ruling came down, I sat alone in my apartment. I held the pocket watch. I turned it over. I read the inscription. Trust your own mind. I set it back on the table. I didn't need to read it again. I already knew what it said. I had always known. The quiet in the room wasn't heavy. It was steady. It was clear. I never regretted a single second of it. If you enjoyed this story about standing your ground and trusting yourself when the people closest to you tried to take that away, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.